So, we're looking at another video about the history of India. This one's from HistoryMarche once again, and it's called the Battle of Talikota? Talikota? That's how I'm gonna assume it's pronounced. So yeah, like I said, I like how we're going even further east, so it's definitely gonna be interesting to learn a bit more about India. We've only really kind of seen one or two videos about it, so definitely gonna be interesting seeing more about this area and the world. And I don't really know any of the background or what the heck's going on, so let's get to it so I can. Without any further ado, let's watch the Battle of Talikota by HistoryMarche. Oh.
From the 8th century onwards, the Indian subcontinent was subject to relentless Islamic invasions. Eventually, Muslim leaders oversaw the forming of various empires and sultanates, establishing a presence that lasted for centuries. Around the mid-1500s, in the Deccan region of South India, the presence of those faithful to the word of the Prophet was manifested in the form of 5 sultanates that, despite sharing the same faith, were constantly at each other's throats. But while the Islamic states were expanding their influence and territories, local Hindus were not being idle. Just to the south of the Deccan Sultanate stood a powerful Hindu state, the Vijayanagara Empire. This video is brought to you by March of...
Okay, so I'm assuming off the bat from that information, it's gonna be sort of a religious thing, I'm guessing, between Hinduism and Islam. And I'm guessing that's gonna be the catalyst of the conflict?
The Vijayanagara Empire rose to prominence as a culmination of attempts by the southern Hindu powers to ward off Islamic invasions. At its peak, it had subjugated almost all of South India's ruling families, thus becoming a notable power. In 1542 AD, the latest Vijayanagara emperor died at a young age, leaving only his nephew Sadashiva Raya, who was underage at the time, as the heir to the throne. A commander and son-in-law of the previous emperor, Rama Raya, saw an opportunity to assert himself and seize the throne. He was a valiant commander, a skillful and fearsome warrior, who had led several successful campaigns in the past, and was also an able administrator and diplomat. Acting as regent, he put the legitimate heir under virtual house arrest, quickly taking control of the state, and replaced officers in important positions with people personally loyal to him. Now a de facto ruler of the Vijayanagara Empire, Ramaraya's policy was that of pitting one sultan against the other, aiming to expand the borders of his empire and keeping the realm secure by capitalizing on the enmity between the Deccan sultans.
Okay, so, that's already interesting off the bat. He, according to HistoryMarche's, description of him, he seems competent in an administration, and, he definitely can play the game of politics, and I think his strategy here, which I would just sum up as divide and conquer, is kind of genius. Let his enemies have enmity towards one another, meanwhile he can just go and move in and take them all off one by one. So off the bat, he's a united front, he's taken control of a very impressive empire, and now he's gonna pick off his enemies while they're busy picking off each other. I think that's a great plan, actually. Like I said, divide and conquer, always a kind of a goated approach, if you ask me.
This policy of divide and rule was made easier by the quarreling Deccan sultans, who repeatedly asked Rama Raya to act as mediator. In the mid-1540s, when
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, like, I think it was the Ottomans when we were covering the rise of the Ottoman Empire by kings and generals. Kind of how the earlier Ottomans would kind of start integrating themselves into conflicts, like I think with the Romans and other Turkish powers, and this kind of gave them prestige as they were kind of like, okay, sure, we'll help you, you know, since you're calling for our help. Meanwhile, slowly encroaching in their territory, building up their prestige and power. So we're kind of I'm kind of feeling like I'm seeing something similar like this, you know, him being called by these other guys, and now giving an opportunity, or pretext rather, to make moves under the idea of helping, you know what I mean? So I'm kind of thinking he's gonna succeed in whatever he's doing. Like I said, I don't know any of these people. I don't know anything about Indian history, guys. But I'm kind of feeling like, with the way he's going, I think he's gonna win. I think his empire's gonna maybe pull it off.
rulers of Ahmadnagar and Golconda sought help against the Sultan of Bijapur, Ramaraya initiated his policy of intervention by entering the conflict and securing a strategic area to the north of his realm. A couple of years later, in 1549, the ruler of Bijapur and Bidar declared war on Nizam Shah of Ahmadnagar. As a result, Ramaraya fought on behalf of the Ahmadnagar ruler and secured the fort of Kalyana. Then in 1557, he allied himself with Ali Adil Shah of Bijapur and the ruler of Bidar during the Bijapur invasion of Ahmadnagar. The combined armies of the three kingdoms were able to defeat the alliance between Ahmadnagar and Golconda. Year in, year out, as conflicts between the Deccan Sultanates continued for almost 20 years, Ramaraya skillfully kept switching sides to further his interests.
Genius. The dude is playing this perfectly. His plan is going incredibly well. And again, they seem none the wiser about him just kind of being all over the place, right? Because I think they're blinded by their own petty rivalries to realize the actual threat that's starting to emerge, you know?
Then, in 1558, yet another conflict sparked between the Deccan Sultanates. The ruler of Bijapur was on the brink of war with the Sultan of Ahmadnagar. Ali Adil Shah of Bijapur sought the assistance of the ruler of Golconda and of Ramaraya. In a continuation of this vicious cycle of interchangeable and opportunistic coalitions, which was typical of the period, the three powers entered into an alliance. In 1559, the large allied host traveled north to Ahmadnagar and besieged the fortress capital. The Ahmadnagar forces chose to abandon the capital and engage in guerrilla warfare, given the overwhelming odds against them. Reportedly, Ramaraya and his army responded by committing terrible atrocities and inflicting horrific violence upon the locals, destroying mosques and ravaging the countryside. This display of cruelty shocked the ruler of Golconda, who backed out of the alliance.
Dang.
The ruler of Bijapur was equally alarmed by the conduct of his ally, but remained loyal due to political concerns. By 1561...
Alright, that's what we call red flag. Ramaraya, you're giving the red flags now. As I think there's at least one of them realized, holy crap, like, this dude doesn't care, does he? Like, you know, obviously destroying mosque and whatnot is an attack on, like, I guess a religious institution. It'd be the same as if you just, like, destroyed a church, like, kind of showing you don't really care much about the thing, which makes sense. He is Hindu, and I'm pretty sure they must, there is Hinduism, and I'm pretty sure they must be aware, right, if their allies, like, practice in that sense. But, you know, like, I think it does give off the show that, yeah, of his ruthlessness, and also he doesn't care about, like, you know, Islam in that sense. So, yeah, again, showing off the red flags off the bat around this point.
Hussein Nizam Shah of Ahmadnagar sued for peace. Rama Raya accepted on the condition that Hussein agree to 3 humiliating terms. First, give disputed lands to Bijapur. Second, execute his best general. And third, Hussein would be forced to eat out of Rama Raya's hands, a humiliating act deemed outrageous at the time.
Yeah, beyond outrageous, what the heck? Okay. These are the wildest peace terms we've ever seen in this channel's history. Usually it's just make peace, maybe limit your army, give us land. This dude is like, kill your best general. What the, like, that's a wild thing. And eat out of my, those are wild. Okay, I'm starting to see Rama Raya. He's a menace. And we love menaces on this channel. They make it more entertaining. Again, he's giving off the red flags, right, that we're seeing. And those conditions are wild though. Like, no way he would accept them, right? Like, if he does, that's wild. And that purposely, like, would limit him. Not only in terms of depriving him of military talent with his general, but also his prestige. He's a sultan, right? So him doing that would belittle himself to a foreign power. I'm starting to wonder if these conditions are meant to be outrageous, so Nizam can just, like, not accept them, so Rama Raya can continue whatever he wants to do. Because if he does accept this, I feel like he would incredibly diminish himself.
Execute his best general. And third, Hussein would be forced to eat out of Rama Raya's hands, a humiliating act deemed outrageous at the time. Having little choice, the ruler of Bijapur complied, but swore vengeance.
That is wild, the fact that he agreed to that. Like, like I said, those conditions make him appear weaker, in my opinion. Like, devalue him. The fact that he agreed to them? Wild.
Needless to say, Rama Raya had by now become a problematic ally for the sultanates, but what eventually tipped the political scale against him was what he did next. While retreating through Bijapur, his army plundered and ravaged the lands of his own ally, even going as far as annexing some of his territory. Feeling utterly betrayed, Ali Adil Shah terminated his alliance with Rama Raya. The leaders of the Deccan Sultanates realized that the real threat was the...
Okay, so that's what I said. He's starting to give off red flags between his brutality, desecration of towns, cities, and whatnot. You know, his wild peace terms, and this, just straight up attacking his own ally. He gave off all the red flags to immediately set everyone off, like, wait a minute, maybe, like, this guy isn't, like, cool. And that's the thing, though, huh? Like, I'm wondering if he wants this. Like, I'm not sure if Rama Raya's playing chess right now, and he's now feeling more comfy in, you know, showing this other's more, ruthless side to him. Because before he was playing the game perfectly, let them fight each other, kind of help with alliances, and, you know, jump around, but overall show himself as an ally. Now he just alienated everyone off the bat, and has shown everyone his true colors. I'm wondering if this is a mistake, or he wanted to. He seemed like a very smart man, that's the thing. So if this is a part of his plan, then good. If not, then, you know, this might be a huge problem, as everyone might be like, maybe we should jump this dude. You know what I mean?
The aggressive and powerful Vijayanagara Empire. And so, the sultans of Bijapur, Ahmadnagar and Golconda entered a pact. Intermarriage between sultanate families helped resolve any differences between the Muslim rulers, cementing their alliance. Resentful, they...
Nothing to unite enemies than having another common enemy, eh?
agreed to make war against Vijayanagara, and as soon as the marriage festivities were over, an emissary was sent to Ramaraya's court with a simple message: give up the key forts of Mudgal and Raichur. Ramaraya made no attempt to hide his contempt for this ultimatum, and sent the emissary back without even considering a formal reply. The stage was set.
Alright, Ramaraya. I'm interested in seeing if he can take on this coalition that has formed against him. You know? Sorry, I drink so much water during these videos. Okay. So, coalition wars. We've covered these many times, and I've said this every time a coalition has popped up in these channels, and I'll continue to say it for the rest of this channel's history. With coalitions, you don't want your enemy armies to all gather at the same time. You know, like, we look at Napoleon, who I think is the master of fighting coalitions. What made Napoleon so successful is he wouldn't let his enemies all gather together. He would outmaneuver them, outpace them, isolate them, and take them on separately, divide and conquer. Ramaraya is no stranger to the divide and conquer strategy. He was doing it politically, but now, since everyone has realized what a huge menace he is, he now has to do it in a more militaristic sense. So, I wonder if he's gonna go with that approach, because I think he would have to if he's gonna have to be successful against these multiple things, because letting them all gather at the exact same time as one massive unit, I think could be dangerous. And I don't even know the military strength of each army, like numbers and whatnot, but I would imagine altogether would be overwhelming. I don't know, I guess we'll see Ramaraya. Like I said, I'm still not even sure if he wanted this, or did he let his true color show in an inopportune time, which has now led to this. Like I said, I'm not sure, but I guess we'll find out, won't we?
In early 1565, the combined forces of Ahmadnagar, Bijapur and Golconda began marching towards Vijayanagara. Meanwhile, an overconfident Ramaraya continued to remain unperturbed, and even though he didn't perceive this as a threat of any consequence, he nonetheless began to make his own preparations.
He's undisturbed by this? I'm not sure if that's a bit odd to me. Like, like most of the sultanates teamed up and now are marching towards you together, I feel like he should be a bit concerned. But, I don't know, maybe he just has nerves of steel.
A contingent of about 20,000 horsemen was sent as an advance force under the leadership of one of his brothers. He followed up with another force of sizable strength, intending to prevent the Islamic army from crossing the Krishna River, which demarcated the northern borders of his empire. The huge but cumbersome Vijayanagara army slowly marched to meet the enemy. On the 28th of December 1564, allied Sultanate armies reached the river Krishna and were soon followed by the huge army of Ramaraya. The fords were few and well guarded by Hindu vanguards, and given the numerical advantage of the Vijayanagara army, a contested crossing would have been far too risky for the coalition forces.
Okay, so I was worried, but now I'm starting to see something different. I was like, surely that all these guys' armies together would be great, but apparently Ramaraya's empire can field an army that can surpass these three sultanates combined. Okay, so that would explain why he's not so quick to try to keep them separate. He can literally match and even overwhelm them numerically on his own. Okay, that gives a completely different impression. He has that. Okay, that explains it. Like I said, like at first I wasn't sure if he's just like overconfident, if it's a bad thing or a good thing, like, but now I'm starting to get the bigger picture. Like I said, I don't know anything about these people, never heard of them until today. I don't know anything about Indian history, so obviously I'm even more ignorant now than I usually am in my videos. Especially in this region that's completely foreign to me. How big is his army? He'll explain it when we get to the battle, I'm sure, but I'm interested in seeing the numerical manpower that India can provide at this point in history.
It was the Sultan of Ahmadnagar who eventually came up with a cunning stratagem. He ordered the Sultanate armies to march eastwards to an undefended ferry further down the river. Ramaraya started following him after withdrawing many of his forces from the river fords. For 2 days, both armies marched eastwards until, on the 2nd of January 1565, behind the screen of dust that was made by the moving army, a select body of hardy and swift cavalry under Nizam Shah made a forced march back to the original fording point. The few remaining Vijayanagara troops that were guarding the ford were caught completely off guard and were annihilated by the lightning-fast Muslim contingent.
Okay, that's not good for Ramaraya. Yeah, he got caught off guard. And it seems like the enemy is starting to now seize the initiative against him. And whoever seizes the initiative usually wins, so Ramaraya's gotta do something. I feel like he's being a bit too, slow, and definitely kind of just letting his enemies dictate stuff. I think he needs to start, you know, seizing the initiative again, and, you know, reacting more. He seems a bit too, I guess passive? I'm not sure if that's the correct word to use, but either way, yeah, as of right now.
With a bridgehead secured, the rest of the Sultanate armies lost no time and immediately marched back and crossed the river. In a stroke of genius, Nizam Shah stole the crossing, avoiding potentially massive casualties. Despite being outwitted, the old Vijayanagara regent, who was then in his 80s, was not disheartened by this setback.
He's 8? Oh my god. I know, like, I was going by the picture. I thought he was, like, younger. Like, maybe, like, I don't know. Maybe, like, 40s. Dude's 80. Holy. You know, Ramaraya's, like I said, I'm not sure what's going through his head. A part of me is like, is he, like, secretly this is all playing into his plan? Or is he, like, being too lax and that's gonna come back to bite him in the butt? I'm not sure. But, things keep happening and he keeps not... Things of concern keep happening. And he keeps being unperturbed, which I'm not sure is a good sign or a bad sign. At this point. Because, first of all, letting them all show up, he's not worried. And then next he gets outwitted and loses some of his power. Still is undeterred, like I said, I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing at this point.
He decided to personally lead the Hindu armies and ordered some of his units to randomly attack the Muslim force. But the conduct of his soldiers was undisciplined and without a strategy. After some minor skirmishing, the two armies marched southwards until they reached a plain near the city of Talikota. At the crack of dawn, on January 26, 1564...
Okay, sorry, I'm just looking at the thing. For a second, I thought those were sheep. In Ramaraya's thing, I'm like, is he gonna use sheep to fight? Like, war sheep? I mean, we have so many animals, you know, elephants, horses, camels. I don't think these are sheep. Just for a second there, I saw it that I'm like, war sheep, possibly? Like, that would be cool. I think those are supposed to be elephants. I think. I don't know, he'll explain it.
5. The two enormous armies arrayed for battle. Estimations about the size of the Muslim force that marched against Rama Raya's empire vary wildly. In total, the army numbered around 80,000 infantry and 30,000 cavalry, accompanied by several dozen modern artillery cannons that were the trump card of the Allied army. The army of the Deccan Sultanates deployed in a linear formation, with infantry and cavalry intermixed between the different rulers of the coalition. The cannons were placed behind the main line. Rama Raya's Hindu army was even larger, numbering an estimated 140,000 infantry, 10,000 cavalry, and over 100 war elephants.
Holy crap. Dude, the numerical power. Yeah, that's insane. Okay, yeah, those were elephants, I was correct. For a sec. War sheep. That's so stupid. War sheep, just like sheep with like guns attached to them. That I'm sorry, I'm getting the image in my head, it's making me laugh. War sheep. I'm sorry, let's get to the video.
The force also included a considerable amount of cannons, but their artillery pieces were heavy, unwieldy, and obsolete.
Let me get that again.
The force also included a considerable amount of cannons, but their artillery pieces were heavy, unwieldy, and obsolete.
Ooh, okay, artillery is gonna play a role, I see. Okay. So again, Rama Raya has things going for him. He has the numerical superiority, but we've covered many times before, and we've seen it demonstrated in many battles. Numerical superiority isn't everything, and there are plenty of battles where that advantage was negated, but once again, it still is an advantage. Meanwhile, he has that going for him, and elephants are I'm not sure about. Elephants can be a huge advantage, depending on how they're used. I love war elephants, they're my favorite animal, but they have many drawbacks. For instance, they can be scared, and if frenzied, they can often become more of a hindrance than an asset. We see many times where elephants get scared and they just run back and trample on their own forces. And their main advantage is they're a shock unit, and so they work more effectively when you're dealing with enemies who don't know how to deal with them or their weaknesses. I'm assuming that the Sultanate ain't strangers to war elephants, so they may not prove to be that beneficial. But even like when we think of Pyrrhus of Epirus, when he fought the Romans, he got his 2 victories over the Romans because the Romans were unfamiliar with how to deal with the elephants. But once the Romans smartened up, the elephants kind of became useless. That's kind of the whole thing with elephants. Like, I feel like they're more useful for that. But then again, there's also people like Timur who used elephants, and he used them effectively, though from what I've seen, Timur used his elephants usually near the end of battles, when the enemy was already weakened, and then the elephant would kind of be used as like a hammer to take on an exhausted enemy. So with those 2 factors in mind, either A, elephants, again, can be used in more of a beginning of a battle if you're dealing with enemies who don't know how to deal with them, or B, save them for near the end of the battle when the enemy's already kind of exhausted, and then you throw them in. So again, I'm putting a bit of an a maybe on the elephant advantage. Could be, but depending on how the Islamic forces know how to deal with them, the elephants could just be useless. And again, artillery against elephants, if there's anything that can take on an elephant, it's artillery. Let's jump over to the Islamic forces. Artillery, incredibly beneficial. In fact, quite the asset. And them having better artillery might just be, like, again, he said their trump card. Could just be, like, the deciding factor. So an artillery duel off the bat would probably not be good for Ramaraya. He might want to engage in a battle off the bat. But then again, now it's left to just infantry and cavalry. And I'm not sure which ones would fare better. Alright, let me get back to see how many elephants he has.
Also included a considerable amount of cannons, but their artillery pieces were heavy, also without number of cavalry, and over 100. The Vijayanagara also deployed in a linear, bulky formation, designed to use the advantage of their huge numerical superiority. Ramaraya's army would rely on brute force to win the day. Around noon, the battle began with heavy artillery fire.
Okay, nothing fancy, no maneuvers, no flanks, nothing fancy, just we're gonna beat them because by sheer force. Again, with numerical superiority, it can be done, but that depends on the quality of his enemies.
The barrage lasted for almost 2 hours, but did little damage to both armies. Then, the right wing of the Hindu army charged frantically against the enemy left wing. Hindu soldiers ploughed through the Muslim divisions, their assault so vigorous that it looked like a Hindu victory was imminent. Nizam Shah sent a few of his forces to shore up the ranks of his hard-pressed left, which was by now in retreat. What followed was a bloody melee of men and metal. Soon afterward, the Hindu left wing fell upon the opposing Muslim right. Here, too, it initially appeared to be a Hindu onslaught.
Ooh.
As the bloody and obstinate combat was raging on, swift Muslim horse archers wheeled...
Oh my goodness. Yeah, we already covered that the coalition, by the way they outmaneuvered, Ramaraya before, showing that they have probably better speed and maneuverability compared to Ramaraya, who HistoryMarche stated earlier his army was slower, so, and more bulky. So now I'm seeing that the Islamic forces have probably better speed and maneuverability. Look, they just literally pulled off. Now they're just about to fall on the flank right here.
To their right and began peppering the Hindu formations with murderous arrows. Now, the odds turned as Ramaraya's forces were being pushed back. A few contemporary reports also claim that 2 Islamic commanders that served in the Hindu army on the left wing now switched sides and refused to fight and kill fellow Muslims. Seeing this, the Hindu leader ordered his treasurer to place heaps of money all around him so that he might confer rewards on anyone distinguishing himself in battle.
Dang.
We are not cowards to be intimidated of this insignificant war. Go on, fight, he cried out. Reinvigorated by this display of bravery, the Hindu center now charged against Nizam Shah's men. A tumultuous crowd of thousands of men was now attacking the heart of the Islamic army. It was the critical point of the battle. Just before the Hindu soldiers reached the Mohammedan line, the front rank of artillery pieces fired a devastating shot at close quarters. In a moment of pure genius, the artillery officers had stuffed their guns not with the usual shot, but with bags full of slug-like copper coins. In one grape shot, 5,000 of the Vijayanagarans lay dead or writhing in pain.
Oh my gosh.
This tactic threw the Hindu center into confusion, upon which 5,000 Muslim cavalry charged through the intervals and cut their way...
Again, artillery, dude. Such a great asset, and definitely the trump card was utilized incredibly well. That's insane.
Into the midst of the disorganized mass, trying to reach the spot where Ramaraya had taken post. Dismounted from his horse, Ramaraya was instead carried on a sedan chair, ultimately failing to escape the fast-moving Muslim cavalry. The litter-bearers let fall their precious burden in terror at the enemy's approach. Before he had time to recover himself and mount a horse, the old commander was seized and promptly beheaded.
Dang.
This event threw the Hindus into a general panic. What followed next was a massive and disorganized retreat. Seizing the moment, Nizam Shah's cavalry charged the retreating Hindus. The warriors of Islam slaughtered everyone in sight, along an area spanning about 20 miles, now littered with dead bodies. The stragglers fled to their capital from the victorious Muslim army, but the confusion was so great that little attempt was made to defend the walls and the approaches. Eventually, almost all of the Hindu army was annihilated.
Wow. Dang, that artillery advantage really came in clutch, dude. And, wow.
The victorious sultans marched to the capital of the empire virtually unopposed. Those who had the means escaped, but others were not so lucky. With axes, crowbars, fire and sword, the victorious armies of the Deccan sultanates went about the task of bringing to rubble the city of Vijayanagara. In just a few days, one of the most magnificent cities in the world was reduced to a smoldering ruin. It never recovered from the destruction. The Battle of Talikota was a decisive moment for the history of the Indian subcontinent. It was the death knell for large Hindu kingdoms in India, spelling the end of the Vijayanagara Empire, which survived only as an insignificant peripheral kingdom until 1646.
Okay, after the death of Ramaraya, one of his brothers started the Aravidu dynasty, and this dynasty ended in 1646.
Special thanks to our friend Hawk S. Bellum for collaborating. Check out to make those like one. So now credit goes back to our awesome patrons.
Okay. Ramaraya was eventually beheaded by Sultan Nizam himself. His death created confusion, havoc. His brother deserted the battlefield with the entire army and tried to temporarily regroup before moving on to the outskirts of their empire. His other brother was blinded. Ooh. Probably a casualty. Let's see what else. The Sultanate armies went on to plunder the city unopposed. The degree of destruction is debated by historians. Okay, the battle caused a political rupture for the state and permanently configured Deccan politics. Monuments and temples, patronage of monuments and temples ceased, and the Vishnav cult perished. Wow. Dang, man. And before I was like, man, maybe like Ramaraya can do it, but by the end I feel like he made several blunders. I think he became too lax at certain points, for sure. Too unbothered by things that should have bothered them, and I think he showed his red flags and his colors way too soon, which caused everyone to start seeing him as the threat. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say other than he definitely was promising at first, cunning, but I think his personal errors, like I just mentioned, definitely led to the defeat. So, yeah.